is so easy to end up in your 8th year, sitting at your computer, stressed out, feeling trapped, and thinking, oh my gosh, I am never going to graduate. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel where we talk about everything grad life, grad advice, and research. And in today's video, we are discussing how long does a PhD really take? And more specifically, we are exploring what are the things that slow down graduate students through their graduate PhD process. But before we do that, I have merch. So if you are a future PhD and you are interested in carrying that title around with you, I would head to the link in my description or to my website so you can cop you some future PhD merch. So the first thing that slows down graduate students is just plain old indecisiveness. Now, indecisiveness can be informed by a variety of different things like imposter syndrome, or just not understanding what the expectations are, like the hidden curriculum of academia, or just misinformation altogether. Which is why YouTube channels like mine are so important, because we work to help demystify the graduate school process, to support you and help give you the confidence and the information you need to be successful as a graduate student. And the reason that this can slow you down is because so much of the PhD process is self-directed and is informed by independent study. So unlike your undergraduate experience, where most of, if not all of your program or your academic trajectory was already pre-planned out for you, in a PhD process, you're kind of making all of your decisions on your own. And as a result, all of these decisions really feel very big and overwhelming and super important and permanent. But I'm here to tell you that they really aren't. I mean, yes, the decisions you are making are important and can feel big, but the reality is they're not really that permanent. And that's because so much of graduate school is about stumbling through the graduate process and making mistakes and obviously learning. And what this actually means is you are allowed to continue to grow and to reevaluate what are your values or your focuses or just things that you like or interest you. The next thing that slows down graduate students is your faculty or the committee that you've developed. And that's because your faculty or your committee are basically the gatekeepers of your academic progress. They're the ones who decide if you pass or fail. They're the ones that are going to tell you if your research project is significant or if it's important or valuable. They're also the ones that are going to be signing your, letters of recommendation or suggesting you for nominations to certain awards or funding opportunities or things like that. And so by not having good faculty or a committee that is invested in your success, that can fundamentally slow down your graduate process in a way that can be really hard to overcome. And while I'm currently working with some graduate friends to develop a video on what is important to consider when developing a committee or choosing your faculty advisors, I do want to generally say, when you are searching your faculty advisors, you don't want to just search for the smartest or the most famous person in your department. You want to make sure that this person is really good at mentorship, that they're invested in your success, that they like you as a person, and that they are just genuinely kind and see their position as a faculty member not as some authoritarian thing that gives them permission to abuse or haze or be mean to people, but rather as a position in which they can encourage and develop their future colleagues or develop their future peers. Because the reality is there's just so much more with choosing a faculty member or your committee than just their smarts or their notoriety. I've had students or graduate students that I know personally who are on their last leg of their graduate process, and the only thing keeping them from being able to graduate is that their faculty member keeps rejecting their dissertation or keeps saying they're not ready or keeps denying them into the next phase. In fact, using myself as an example, when I was taking my PhD comprehensive exams, when I submitted my prospectus or my research plan, almost all of my committee members said that it wasn't written really well and it needed to be developed better. Now, they could have just failed me and said that it was a trash prospectus and that I didn't deserve to advance, but instead they said, okay, this prospectus needs a lot of work. Here are the things you need to do to make your prospectus better, and then when you resubmit it, we'll be able to advance you to candidacy. So even though I wasn't the most prepared or most polished or perfect graduate student, my faculty members saw my potential and wanted to mentor me into the process of being a more well-rounded scholar. scholar. So instead of failing me, they developed me as a student. And that, again, can make a big difference, because if they would have just failed me, that may have, and definitely probably would have, slowed me down or put me behind progress at least an additional year. And so by being really choosy or aware of what your priorities are, but also finding faculty that care about you, you can really increase the time that you progress through your graduate process. The other thing that slows down people is funding. And I bring it up a lot on this channel, and that's because it is so important and it really did affect me a lot. And if we're just gonna say it simply, funding impacts your ability to move through your PhD process, because it's much easier to only focus on your research in your classes than it is to juggle multiple jobs while also doing your classwork, while also doing your independent research. And so I'm not saying this again to scare you if you're somebody who doesn't have funding, because we all know I started my PhD with absolutely no funding, but instead to make sure you understand, if you are a student like me who has no funding, that you are prioritizing developing systems to help you manage your multiple jobs or find funding for you or future moments in your research process. Because if these 4 years have taught me nothing else, it's that working as a graduate student can be a lot. And funding research can be really expensive. You might need software or research assistance, or you might, like I do, need to travel to another country for an extended period of time. And if you don't have funding to support those things and you are working multiple jobs, you may not be able to prioritize your progress towards your dissertation and are just kind of working to stay afloat within your program. And so by just creating systems and supporting yourself, or checking out my past playlist to figure out how to accrue funding, you will be better prepared to move through your graduate process and to avoid this major obstacle or roadblock. The next thing that slows down graduate students is actually the easiest one to avoid, because it is 100% self-inflicted. And that is perfectionism. I've joined a lot of self-help graduate student groups. I've talked to older graduate students and faculty and mentors, and they've all kind of told me the same thing. And it's that a done dissertation is better than a perfect dissertation. And what this means is a lot of graduate students spend so much time trying to develop the world's most prolific and beautiful research project that has ever existed that they take years thinking about it instead of just writing it. And I mean, honestly, this could apply to almost anything that we do in any aspect of our life. But if you spend more time trying to think about or prepare, or just overwhelm yourself with making the most beautiful, perfect thing to ever exist over just doing the thing, then it probably won't get done. Or if it does get done, it'll take you a much longer time. So what I try to do to help reframe the way that I'm approaching my dissertation, but also my PhD progress in general, is that I'm doing my best every time, but my best never has to be perfect. And what this means is I'm giving myself room to be imperfect. And so while I'm writing my first draft of something, I'm really seeing it as my first draft. I expect it to be the worst thing that I've written, and through working with my advisors, through joining writing groups, to going to the writing center on campus, I expect it to get better with every rendition. And so when you are approaching your graduate process, you need to practice being gentle with yourself and not expecting perfectionism. In fact, I would encourage you to expect being pretty bad at everything at first, and then working towards getting better with every effort or every new approach to the thing that you are writing. Now, the next thing that slows down graduate students, I've actually been a victim of, and it wasn't until this summer that I've had the ability to work through this mindset, and that is confusing your priorities. At the end of the day, you are a graduate student and your goal is to graduate. And that means, yes, while you should be trying to publish or present at conferences or find funding, those things shouldn't be prioritized over your actual degree progress. And that was really hard for me because, again, thinking about funding, it was really difficult to balance everything all the time. And I felt like I was never getting the ability to move through my PhD like my cohort mates who did have funding or did have financial support. But what I realized is, by taking a step back and really thinking about what do I need to get out of here and to graduate, I noticed that there was a lot of things that I was doing that were extra that really weren't necessary to help me succeed. Now, this isn't to say these extra things like publishing, conferences, and getting grants don't help you in the long run, because they definitely do. They can help you be prepared for your academic career. If you win grants, they help you with financial stability, and the list can go on and on. But the reality is you have to strike a sort of balance that allows your research to still come first. And so what I was doing that was a major mistake is I was trying to publish all of these things while also do all these grant applications, instead of thinking, how can I progress my dissertation? How can I write my first chapter? How can I think about, my methodologies or my methods that I'm going to do to answer these questions? And by reframing those things, I now have a clearer idea of when I can and may graduate. Where before I was just kind of treading water and trying to keep my head above, now I know this is the timeline that I need to graduate if I prioritize these things. And I can now put in conferences, article papers, and grant proposals within that greater plan. Because if you don't start prioritizing the things that help you progress academically, it is so easy to end up in your 8th year, sitting at your computer, stressed out, feeling trapped, and thinking, oh my gosh, I am never going to graduate. And nobody really wants to feel that way. So it's so important to make sure that you are focusing on your academic progress, and all the extra auxiliary stuff are really just there to support your research or to support your progress, versus taking on a bunch of extra projects, writing a bunch of extra grants, doing all of these extra things that seem like they will look good on your CV, but don't help you get towards your final dissertation or your graduation date. So if you're a new PhD and you're still trying to figure out what makes grad school so hard and ways to progress through it easier, I would check out my past video on why is grad school so hard. And if you're somebody who's concerned about their funding situation, I would check out my grad funding playlist. Don't forget to get you some future PhD merch. And as always, your likes, subscribes, and comments helps a small YouTuber like me continue to grow. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.